Hi friends, this is Jennifer and I'm back with another video. I'm very glad that you're joining me. So in this video I will have a tutorial part where I show you two different techniques and then I will show you how I made this card. When I showed this card on Instagram, I was asked how I built that Peekaboo slider, how I call it, and it's actually very easy. I chose to make another card and include another technique, a partial slider, meaning that this surfing guy will just move a part of the way and not the whole range of the Peekaboo slider. To explain and illustrate the two techniques, I will use very simple models. And in the card making part, you can see the whole thing in actual use. Please find timestamps in the description box to easily jump to either one of the techniques or the card making part. Okay, let's start with the first technique, the Peekaboo slider, for which we will need a front panel and a second panel, which can be your card base, but I prefer a separate panel. And then we need some heavy-duty acetate. If you don't have such sturdy acetate, you can stick two medium-weight acetates together. And then we need the object with an opening. Through that, our critters will peek out eventually. This can be anything: build a house, barn, castle, acorn house, mushroom house, lift the flaps, tree backdrop, whatever you think of. You can even use something else and cut your own opening in it. Okay, so now we need to place our object where we want to have it eventually and trace the opening. In case you have multiple openings, you have to trace them all. And then we need to cut a hole that is slightly bigger than the traced area, but smaller than the object. So it will be hidden behind the object. I've already prepared that. And then we will trace this opening on our second panel. So this will be the background of our critters. You can use pattern paper for that. Just cut it to size and glue it to the marked area, or color it in with Copics or whatever medium you prefer. The next step is to determine the size of the acetate. We have to consider that we will need a frame within which the acetate can move eventually. The required height of the acetate depends on our opening. So to use this card as an example, I had to make sure that I cover the barn door and the speech bubble. And for our model, I will use the whole range or the whole height within the frame. And I just use a pen to mark the position where I have to cut the acetate. And to determine the width of the acetate, I need the critters that I will move. And I place the first critter, the rightmost critter, within our traced area. And then I move the acetate to the right until the leftmost critter is within our traced frame. And then I can mark where to cut the acetate widthwise. So I'm just checking if that's correct. And then I will go ahead and cut the acetate in both dimensions. Then I can adhere my pull tab. I just used a leftover strip of cardstock for my model. Later in the card making part, you can see what dies I used. And I centered this pull tab and adhered it to my slider piece. Now I will adhere my frame. So for this demo, I have cut this whole piece, but for my card I actually used strips of cardstock that I just placed all around the card. We just have to leave an opening for the pull tab. And then I checked if the acetate piece fits within the frame, and if not, you can adjust that a bit. And then we can adhere our row of critters to the acetate piece. And then check if everything is in its correct place. And then you could assemble the card. And here you can see everything in action. So when I pull the pull tab, the critters behind the openings change. And this is how this mechanism works. Very easy. If you want to have a second opening in your object, you just have to trace it and cut it. And then you adhere your second image according to your first. And that's it. All right, let's continue with the partial slider technique. For this I have prepared a model using orange cardstock instead of acetate because this is much easier to see. But we have the same situation as before. We have a sliding piece moving within a frame. I also prepared a card panel with slits for our sliding piece and a piece of acetate that I folded. I'm adding adhesive to the smaller part of the acetate and then feed it through the slit. And I'm making sure that the fold is facing towards the bottom of the card panel and the glue is facing towards the sliding piece. This way I can adhere it to my slider, and when I pull the tab, my acetate piece will move from left to right. I'm adhering an image to my acetate piece, and then you would cover the slit with a bottom panel, and then you can move the image from left to right. So this is how a slider works generally, but what if I don't want my elements to move the full distance of this main slider, or if I want to move two elements a different distance independently from each other? That's why I thought about this partial slider mechanism that I will demonstrate with this model that I've prepared. So as you can see, I cut two openings in my sliding panel, one at the top and one at the bottom. And in addition, I prepared two strips that are slightly shorter than the height of the openings, and the width of the strips is variable. And then I can prepare my slider as I did before. I use a piece of acetate, the fold facing towards the bottom and the glue facing towards the orange piece. And I will prepare a second piece of acetate. This time the fold will face the top of the card and the glue is again facing towards the orange piece. And I stuck these acetate pieces to the two orange strips, not the main piece. And these strips move within the openings that I cut in my main piece, in my main panel. And after I attach the images, you can see that the fairy moves a much bigger distance than the unicorn. Okay, now let's say I want my movable element to be placed on the edge of the card. Then I have to place my opening in the sliding panel on the very edge as well. Thus, the opening would not be limited to the left and right, but open to one side. So the separate element doesn't slide back when I slide my main panel back and forth. To solve that problem, I simply tied the two parts together using a piece of thread. To do so, I'm poking two holes in both the separate piece and the main panel, and now I'm connecting both using a needle and thread. I chose to use black thread for this demo piece so it's easier to see. After I threaded through the first hole, I secured with some washi tape, and then I'm kind of sewing the two pieces together. Before securing the second end, I have to determine the length that I need. So I'm placing my panel my front panel on top, and now I'm determining the distance that I want the separate piece to move. Then I'm holding it in place and just pulling the loose end to tighten the thread. And then I'm securing it at the back of the separate piece. And to demonstrate that in action, I'm again using my front panel and the acetate piece, fold facing towards the bottom, glue facing towards the orange piece, and I'm attaching my fairy so that you can see the image move and how the mechanism works. And now I'm using both mechanisms to build my card. I've already prepared the images to create my scene. For the sand, I used these colors of Distress Oxide ink and some perfect pearls in a gold color to give them a little sparkle and shine. And I also splattered them with the blue, gold and white Gansai Tambi watercolors. For the water part, I used these two Distress Oxide inks and the Lawn Fawn Liquid Stardust, as well as some glitter for the top of the waves. And these are the dies that I've used. The Sandy Hill from the Build a House Beach House add-on and from the Scallop Treat Box Beach House add-on, the stitched wave borders and the slimline hillside borders. For my little mailbox, I used the Build a House Spring add-on, and for the surfboard, I used the Beach House add-on. I cut my house from patterned paper and decorated it with pieces from the Spring add-on and the Beach House add-on. And here you can see how I build up some dimension. And for the remaining elements, I used the palm trees and the hammock and trees die sets. And I cut the hammock from off-white and cream-colored cardstock and the palm trees from mint and turquoise. And I ink blended sage leaf on the mint and rainforest on the turquoise pieces. And I used dough ink for my stem. And I used a very cheap blending brush and a swiping motion. So no circular motions as usual. I used the striping motion to get this pattern on my tree. And these are the stamp sets that I've used. The Simply Celebrate Critters for the row of birds. Then I used two birds from Season's Tweetings, the one with the earmuffs and the one without accessory. And I used the cell phone from elphie Selfie to make the earmuffs into headphones. And I cut a slit in the bird's arm so that I can tuck him into the hammock. The other two birds are from Love Letters, and I used some accessories from the On the Beach stamp set and some more accessories from the Beachy Christmas stamp set. And these are the Copic markers that I've used to color my images in, along with some gel pens for some details. So, and for our mechanism, we need some heavy-duty acetate and these pull tabs. There are several pull tab dies by Lawn Fawn. So if you prefer a rectangular one, you could use the Swish and Pop pull tab. I use the Let's Toast pull tab, but there's also the waving pull tab starter set. So you can use whatever you have. And I also die cut the decorative piece for my pull tab. And I cut the tab 3 times because I want to stack them together for more stability. We further need some nylon thread. You could use other thread as well. It doesn't matter because we won't see it. And I used 2 more stamp sets for the sentiments, the Rub-a-Dub-Dub and the Village Shops. And I also prepared my front panel. Mine is 10.5 by 21 centimeters. So this is our slimline format. It's approximately 4¼ by 8¼ inch, very roughly, and I ink blended tumbled glass distressing for my sky. Now I'm starting by placing my house in the center of the card and tracing my opening. I just want to have the Peekaboo slider behind my window, so I'm just tracing the window, and then I'm cutting this traced area out. I have a matching die, but you can also use scissors. And then I have a second piece, and I will trace the opening onto that piece as well. So this will be the background, and I chose to use some pattern paper for this. You can also color it in with markers, but I like this paper from the Let's Shine Petite Paper Pack, my favorite paper pack, which is unfortunately discontinued. I'm using lawn fawn glue. I have filled it in this precision tip bottle, and I'm adhering the pattern paper to the traced area. To determine where to cut my slit for my slider, I placed my waves onto my front panel and shifted them down slightly so I can trace a line. I just need them on the right side of the paper because my slider will be just on the right. And I chose to use the slide and over waves dies to do so. So my surfing guy will really ride the waves. Okay, to determine the required width of my acetate, I'm placing my acetate piece on the left side of the card, and I place my row of birds so that the rightmost bird is inside the traced frame. And then I shift my acetate so that the leftmost bird is inside of the frame, and then I know where to cut my acetate. Now I'm figuring out in which range I want my surfer to slide on my card. So where the starting point is and where I want my slider to end. So it's approximately 3 centimeters. And I'm transferring my markings on my back panel. Here I'm marking the center line of my card panel to help me align everything, to get everything straight. And now I'm placing my tab piece and my acetate piece on the panel to figure out where to cut the opening for my partial slider. Because I want to make sure that I cut my opening below the tab piece that I will eventually adhere to my acetate piece. So I mark this with my pen and cut it. And then I notice that my piece is too short and I will start over with a bigger piece of acetate. Since I'm doing the same steps as before, and since this video is already super long, I will skip that part. So here's my second attempt. And the next step is to build my frame or my walls. And I'm marking the position of the pull tab, because I need to leave an open spot for it. I'm also tracing my acetate piece in its leftmost and its rightmost position so that I know how thick I have to cut my strips to build a wall. After I cut my strips of heavyweight white cardstock, I will glue 2 pieces together for a bit more dimension because my acetate is very thick and I don't want to get it stuck. Then I'm gluing my doubled up cardstock pieces to the edge of the back panel to build my frame. And thanks to video magic, I finished my frame in super speed. I placed my slider and my separate piece inside of my wall and mark the position or the start point of my surfer. And then I'm poking 2 holes in both the main piece and the separate piece so that I can use some thread to connect those pieces eventually. I'm using transparent nylon thread for this purpose, but you can also use colored thread or floss, whatever you have on hand. So after I've connected both pieces with the thread, I'm securing everything with washi tape, and then I'm attaching the row of birds to my acetate piece using double-sided adhesive. I use these MFT replenishments for my slider because I chose this wavy slot instead of a straight slot, so I can't use a piece of acetate as I demonstrated in the technique part. So I adhered this 3D circle to the marked position on my separate acetate piece and let it dry. In the meantime, I start to assemble my card front. So I'm attaching my first sand border to my baby border. Then I added a piece of the Let It Shine paper that I used for my wallpaper behind the open door to give it a clean look. And then I adhere the house to the sand and wave piece. Next I can attach the second sand piece using foam adhesive because of the dimension of the house. And then I use the corner of my scoreboard to help me attach this sand piece to the other part. Now I'm attaching my pull tab to the acetate piece, and I'm marking where I need to use double-sided adhesive tape. Then I attach my pull tab to the acetate piece, and I use that center line that I drew in to help me get everything straight. Then I take the second pull tab that I die cut and glue it to the back of the first pull tab, just to the paper, not to the acetate. I'm doing so to bring paper and acetate to the same level. And then I'm cutting off the part that's overhanging. And after that I will adhere my third pull tab piece at the same spot as I adhered the first, so that my acetate is sandwiched between those two pull tab pieces. To make the pull tab accessible, I will use this notch piece that's included in the pull tab die set, and I'm lining it up with my pull tab to have it at the right position, and you have to make sure that this metal bar is not touching the paper, so this is beyond the paper edge. And after I cut this notch, I can adhere my front panel to the back panel. Oh, and by the way, since I didn't cut that notch in my back panel, I just used my scissors to roughly cut a notch. This won't be visible, so it doesn't matter if it's not perfect. So I'm checking if my slider works, and you can see it works flawlessly. To connect my surfboard to the slider, I use a piece of acetate that I cut to a strip, which I will adhere to that slider using liquid glue, but I actually recommend to use double-sided adhesive. And after that's dry, I will start to decorate my front panel. And I have to use foam tape because of that three-dimensional replenishment piece. And I used foam tapes of various heights to add some interest to my card. The acetate that I used to connect my surfboard with the slider is very thin, so I folded it in half to make it a bit more stable and less wobbly. And I used double-sided adhesive to secure my fold. And then I can attach my surfboard to the acetate piece. I'm using liquid glue to attach the bird to the board, and then I'm using double-sided adhesive to attach the board to the acetate strip. And then my bird can enjoy the waves. And then I decorated my card with all the images that I've prepared, and I also attached a sentiment to the front of the card and also heat embossed a sentiment on my pull tab. I stamped, colored and die cut an additional bird to put him inside of the door, and that finishes my card. I really like how this card turned out, and I like the partial slider, but due to that bulky replenishment piece that I've used, my card became very bulky in total. So you can see the barn card that I did is very flat and easy to mail, while this card is pretty bulky. Anyways, I thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope it was helpful and inspiring, and I wish you a wonderful day. See you next time. Bye bye.